Jim. Enormous respect for Jim and his style and what he's accomplished. I'm much more of a selling CEO. And so I'm going to talk to you from that vantage point, and just know that all my biases come from that. Now, I'd like to start with something that was raised by Larry just now over the difference between a hunter and the farmer on the sales team. And I think the honest answer for me is it depends on the product I'm selling. If I am selling into a large aggregator, like a Blue Cross plan, the hunter's job never stops. Because if I allow them to close the deal and walk away, and I turn it over to an account manager, that contract will always be suboptimized. To give you an example, at Paradigm Health, when we would close a Blue Cross deal, the first year revenue would be about $1 million. But we knew there was probably 15 to 20 million of opportunities sitting there. And if the hunter walks away, the farmer's personality will never get you to the 5 or 10 or 15. So our model at Paradigm, because our customers were primarily large Blue Cross plans, is that the farmers work for the hunter. Now that's different than if I were selling a product where I make a sale, they buy, there's nothing else to sell, and the hunter moves on. Okay? So if I'm selling a SaaS subscription, I would definitely have hunters and farmers separate. But if I'm selling into an aggregator where there's lots of opportunity, I probably would never separate the hunter and farmer because I want to maximize. And that proved true for us. Our average, by the time we sold Paradigm, our average Blue Cross account was about 18 million. But they all started at 1. And the difference is that the hunter was there every month talking to the customer about their problems and issues and how might we address them. It was very much a consultative sell, not a here's what I got in my bag, do you want one of these? No, okay, I'll move on to the next one. So it's I think the challenge in selling is that all of you represent very different kinds of products. And you have to think about your product and say, am I selling into an organization that there's a lot of opportunity for me here, or is this a one and done and I need to target someone else? And that largely, I think, determines your selling structure overall. If you happen to be in a situation where you sell into a large aggregator, a secret that I used at Paradigm is no real secret, but it's something that I rarely see done much, is that we provided our customers the opportunity to earn warrants in the company for hitting targets. By the time we sold Paradigm, Blue Cross Blue Shield in South Carolina, HCSC, which is the Illinois Texas Blues, Blue Shield of California, Health Net, Highmark Blue, all owned a piece of Paradigm. Nothing significant, but they had achieved over a $10 million book of business with us, and they had a seat at the table with us. And it became very helpful because when we were ready to sell the company, they had an upside to the deal. So they were extremely helpful in the due diligence. They became great reference accounts for us. They would open the doors to other Blue plans. They got a bump up every time they introduced us to another Blue plan and the deal closed. So always remember that, particularly for an organization like that has very little interesting upsides to play with, if you find the right person inside of the organization and there's warrants for the organization to be had overall, it can be a magical thing. It added about $60 to $80 million worth of revenue for us that we would have had we not done that. So just kind of keep that in mind. So now kind of get started with what I prepared for you. About half of all companies, particularly in our space, which is health and health technologies for the most part, their sales teams turn over about every year. Nearly 75% change within 3 years, and the average tenure of a sales lead is about 24 to 30 months. Now, you got to ask yourself why. And here's my view after leading companies for about 28 years now. That what happens is that when we start, we sell to these visionaries, the early adopters, because they become our beachhead and they tell other people. But we forget why they bought from us. The reason early adopters buy is they're already dissatisfied with the status quo. They're already frustrated with what else is out there, and we're the new thing. But when we institutionalize our sales process, if we're not really careful, we stop being the new thing. And the minute somebody else is the new thing, you start eroding the share you had, and you start getting into this bigger group of protagonists and the conservatives in the back, which really destroys your sense of speed and identity. There's two pieces of this I want you to think about. First is the market direction. The visionaries, these early adopters, are always pushing the market for the next thing. They want the next new thing. And when you cease to be the next new thing, they start looking for something else. Now, some of them can't leave you, but others can. And you don't capture every new visionary, every new market leader right away. It takes 3 to 5 years to capture them all. But those people introduce us and brag about us to these pragmatists, and they all want something a little different. The visionaries want a revolution. They want things to be really shook up. And so when we're young companies, we look like we're shaking stuff up, and so they buy stuff. But you can't make a very big company out of these visionaries. You know, you got to get to the bigger block in the middle. But these folks want evolution. They don't want a revolution. They want incremental things. So often we got to take what was an explosive product and bust it into 4 or 5 pieces, and let this bigger block try something smaller, get comfortable with us when they try the next thing. So busting the product often into parts helps buy you some of this bigger block. And then the conservatives, they only want safe choices. So all the creativity is pretty much beat out of your product by the time they buy. It's true. And so the question that for sales teams and sales leaders is always, how do you keep these people who want a revolution excited while you get a piece of this? And there's really only one solution I've found over time, and that is to make them reference customers and always be feeding them the next new thing. And let them help you design the next new thing. Now, it becomes helpful in a couple of ways. Because if you do it right, not only will they help you design the next new thing, they'll help pay for the next new thing too. My reference account at Paradigm Health was Blue Shield of California. And the CEO there, the biz dev team, the chief medical officer, all wanted to be revolutionaries. And the reason was very simple. They were competing with WellPoint. And WellPoint would eat their lunch if they weren't revolutionary. And secondly, they had the CalPERS business, and every other insurer in California wanted it. And CalPERS demands you to be very nimble and quick and bring in new things. And CalPERS was always looking for the next new thing, and if Blue Shield didn't bring it, somebody else would. So of the blue plans we had, it became really clear that our visionary, our revolutionary, was going to be Blue Shield of California. And we made it a formal relationship. We promised them that we would try every new thing with them. But in exchange, I wanted them to help pay for the new thing. And if they would have about a 12 to 18 month window lead time over every other blue plan. Now we agreed not to contract with WellPoint in California, as you can imagine, because it was their enemy. But even WellPoint in other markets, we would still give them the 12 to 18 month lead time over everybody else. So they could have the product in and installed with their customer base, because all of our customers were Blues, and their largest, most profitable base of customers are their self-insured employers. They make about 2x off that versus what they do off the insured book. So when you deliver them something that can keep their revenue, they typically find all kinds of ways to help you. So the way I found to make this work is to really focus on who's going to be the reference customer, and everybody needs things. And I find most young companies struggle with this whole idea of a reference customer because they can't figure out what to give them. Well, there's lots of things you can give them. Exclusivity, opportunity to help you with design, all kinds of things. Even a seat at the table if you need to do that. Very powerful if you're looking for a big customer. So, these people at the end never buy. So the other thing you want to think about is when you are looking at your sales pipeline, ask yourself as the leader of the company, have my sales team put them in the right order? Do I have visionaries buying the newest stuff I'm adding? And are we calling on conservatives for the stuff that's 2-3 years old? Because conservatives won't buy the new stuff. And The visionaries won't buy the old stuff. What I see instead often when I go in is I do some work with Galen out of New York. When we go in to buy a company that's sort of stuck as a private equity fund, what we find is that the incentives have been totally screwed up instead of around the products. The sales team is incented to sell the thing with the highest margin, but the thing with the highest margin is the newest thing, of course. That's why it has the highest margin. You've engineered it that way, and it's 50% assumptions. But they're pushing this highest new margin thing on these very conservative customers, and they'll do the mating dance with you for a year. They'll never buy. Rather than understanding that you've got to think about the sales queue, which kind of customer are they, and really incent the sales team around the product that fits the customer. And that takes a little extra work, but it pays off huge if your sales team understand that about your product mix, which kind of customer they are. I'll give you a different example. Blue Cross of Tennessee was one of our customers, one of the most ultra-conservative customers possible. Things need to be at least 2 years stale for them to buy it. And then they got ecstatic to buy it. But anything that looked too new was too terrifying. Now they love to meet, and they love to talk about it. We could meet for 2 years. It was not going to close. And so understand that meetings do not equate to deals, and know the customer and know what drives them, and you'll do much better at sales.
Hey, Michael?
Yes.
Going back to that slide just for a moment.
Yes, sir.
One of the things that we've noticed the past couple of years is that a number of health systems, their approach is very much along the lines of Blue Cross of Tennessee. Interesting product, but tell us more about the testimonials. We want a proven answer. We want a track record of multiple, satisfied customers before we contract. We don't want to be a pioneer just yet. And so that's been the past couple of years. And our impression is that in light of the new world order of the healthcare industry, healthcare reform, the systems sort of having this sense of urgency that they better get their act together, right? They don't have time to sort of sit around and wait, contemplate, reflect on, gosh, the opportunity is there for more and more systems to say, I used to be a conservative, I used to be waiting for a proven answer. Now I'm more prepared to be first in line because I'm sort of desperate for an answer. Would you agree with that in light of this changing world that we're in, we'll see more and more of those conservative health systems moving to the left of the slide?
I think they will move to the left. They'll probably become pragmatists before they become visionaries. But here's what I do see happening a lot. If I'm trying to get a new customer for a company I'm helping, I look for the turnover in the leadership. So a new head of business development, a new head of client relationships at a health plan, a new chief medical officer, because they know they've got 12 to 24 months to make a difference. And if you can get, particularly if it's someone you know, and I have a few friends. I have a friend that just took over a biz dev relationship with the big Catholic West system out in San Francisco. So I'm flying out to meet with them in a couple of weeks for about 6 of my young startups that all do consumer-facing and physician groups. And he's ecstatic to me. The reason is that they're in a very competitive situation. They're sitting on several $100 million in cash, but their month-to-month operations just suck. And they've got to get very oriented to facing consumers, and he's got a very short window of time to get something happening, and he needs something disruptive. And so I find that looking for turnover is the most powerful way to find a conservative that could be a customer to buy something new. Okay? Particularly if it's one of the top 6 seats turns over, that person, that new person, particularly somebody that you know or they know of you, very likely to buy something brand new because they want to come in and shake things up a little bit. Yes, sir.
You mentioned meetings don't translate to sales. You can have ongoing meetings, and depending on where they are on this spectrum, it'll take longer to, if at all, to close a deal. What are some things that you look for? What signals do you look for to see, hey, is this person serious?
Yep. give me about 15 minutes, and I'm going to show you the whole pipeline and what I look for. Okay? I would answer it now, but I got a beautiful slide.
No,
I think it's really nice. But I built it for you this weekend. I want you to see it. All right? Okay? So, lesson one I've learned over the years is who really is the customer for this product. And I match product and customer, not just company and customer, but the product I'm selling to customer. And I'll often have 2 or 3 versions of the same thing. You just maybe a vanilla chocolate strawberry, and one looks really more conservative than the other for the conservatives. You know, trim off some of the more scary sides to them, which has to do with clouds and webs and all those kinds of things. And sales reading, something simple. Now, 3 things every CEO has to do on a sales strategy. Okay, because the turnover of sales leads is very, very fast. 3 things that we have to do if you're leading the company. The first is you need a constant way, and by constant I mean at least once a month, where you're looking at how you're evaluating your performance as a business. Some of the early signs I find are things like a change in the length of the sales cycle, change in deal size, wins and losses for the last 12 months. Has that ratio changed for me in some way? Because it's, if you've ever been on a call with a sales team, you find getting the bad news out of them is like pulling a hen's teeth. I mean, that was my every Monday, first thing, even before the senior team met, sales call, 8:30. And it was the most optimistic first half hour in the world. And only till I started asking hard questions did any truth serum ever emerge into the call. Okay? So you have to do some analysis yourself as the leader and ask some questions and get people used to it's okay to bring up the hard stuff because everybody's here to help. This isn't about a cheerleading session anymore. This is about getting deals done. Let's figure out where the problems are. So knowing your own team's performance and is it improving or not is the one big thing you've got to focus on as the leader of the business. Because you will find some leading indicators if you dig around your method of how you sell that will tell you what's up. You know, I agree with Jim that if you're not making calls, you're certainly not going to close deals. But that's a really rudimentary indicator of deals as compared to something else that might be there. So think about for your business what it is. The second one is evaluate the customer base. Look for changes in the decision makers, changes in their spending habits, their length of sales cycle, additional parties in the buying decision. If I am trying to do a consultative sale, meaning what I sell costs more than, let's say, $10,000, I've got to have several hooks in the customer, more than one person talking to them. And for every $50,000, I almost need another person touching them. In our deals with Blue, I have as many as 15 of my employees interacting with the Blueprint. Why? Because if you get one person turnover there, you still got 14 friends. If you got one relationship and they turn over, nobody knows who the hell you are. And it's amazing how quickly customers can forget who the hell you were. Because what you saved them was last year, not this year. And it's always the what have you done for me lately game. So you need all up and down the food chain. The second thing is train your salespeople to understand that part of their job is figuring out how to help that person on the other side get their promotion, even if it's with a different company. Because the further up the chain they move and you help them get there, they'll never forget you. And they'll always buy from you. And even if you sell this company, if you're like me, you're going to have another one. And you're going to want them to buy from that one too. Or you're on the board of another one and you're going to want to call and have them buy from that one as well. So help your customer all up and down the food chain, figure out how they get their promotions and get to know and get your people connected with them really, really sticky. And then the third is evaluate your competitors. Don't be naive. People are always trying to take something away if you look like you're winning. So as you get success, people are going to put you under a microscope and say, what's causing Bo to have success? How do I go match it? And it's a game that becomes really dangerous because there's a negative side to it. If I'm doing something and Lyle here goes and matches it, my inclination is I got to go one-up him. Okay? And when I do that, he's going to come back and match that, and then I got to go one-up him. If I'm not careful, what happens is I raise my cost of caring for this customer so that I start losing margin. But even more deadly, I forget why the hell they bought it in the first place. because I'm just piling on features to compete with Lyle, I'm losing sight of the real core problem the customer had. If I allow that to happen, I will lose my customer. So when some party starts trying to match you and everything, the most powerful thing you can do is go back to the customer. Just, I don't want to get into a war with them unless it's important to you. What's important to you? And let's talk about how you want this product to ship over time. And that will pay dividends with your customers because they know this game gets played all the time between competing vendors. There's 6 methods of influence that when I'm teaching a sales team, I try to get them. So I thought I'd just share them with you. This is Sales 101, so if it insults you, I'm really sorry. But some of you may not have ever interacted with this stuff before, so I thought I'd share it with you. There's 6 characteristics that create influence. The first is this thing called reciprocity, and that is you give something before you ask for something. So if you're trying to build a prospect list, sharing a report, sharing some data, helping them find somebody to fill a position, getting to know them, and giving something before you ask for something is a very powerful way to build relationships. I use this with my Rolodex all the time. If I meet somebody I really want to get to know, I put them in a certain piece of my Outlook and I send them every other week an interesting article. If somebody I really wanted to know with a handwritten note on it. By the 4th or 5th time I sent them something, they're calling me. They can't help themselves. The guilt just kicks right in and they call. Okay? Notice this, because reciprocity is a very powerful way to start building a relationship. And it's not being mean, it's absolutely altruistic. You're trying to actually help them. They're like, this guy's sincere, he's trying to help me, I want to get to know him. If you do it right, and not with the wrong reasons, it's a very powerful way to build influence. The second is scarcity. The more rare and uncommon something is, the more people want it. So look at the way you describe your products and sell the products and how you talk about it, and don't make it look too much like free Kool-Aid. Help it to look rare and valuable so that people want it even more. If they think they can have it at any time they decide, they'll wait to buy. The third is authority. People respect authority. That has to do with titles and how people dress and how their materials look and how they follow up and everything. And we have gotten into a culture that's very ultra casual and very relaxed. But I will tell you that if someone's going to make a big purchase decision, they're going to revert back to some very classic ways to think of authority. If you don't look like you're selling something that's $1 million product, they're not going to buy a $1 million product. So be very thoughtful of what your team is selling and make sure your team looks the part and acts the part. If you're trying to sell $1 million piece of business and your phone is on an auto attendant at the company, you're probably not going to sell it. Because what they think is you can't even afford somebody to answer the phone. I'm sure as hell I'm going to spend $1 million with you. If you're trying to get me to spend $1 million and one person comes to tell me about it, I'm probably not going to buy it. Because it looks like, well, gosh, you don't have any bench strength. So be really thoughtful about what's the price point you're trying to sell at and appropriately match it with a sense of authority that you're prepared to deliver of that kind of piece of business. The next is consistency. People strive for consistency in their commitments, and they follow pre-existing attitudes and values. So you get little commitments all along. One of the things you start for is, you start with the meeting that you ask for. When you get to the meeting, you talk about sharing data. And you look for tiny little commitments that cost them very little. Because once we make little commitments, we make bigger commitments. Now, I would imagine everyone in this room has given to somebody's political campaign or a charity. And the really good ones start offering you little things that become bigger, and before you know it, you're right in the middle of running the damn thing. Like I am at DC. I'm like, how the hell did I get here? All right? They start with a little commitment. And before you know it, you're just totally into the thing. Okay? Customers are just like that. Likability. People do business with people that are like them, that give them compliments, that they like being around. So get your sales team to be thinking about observing their surroundings. If you walk in somebody's office, there's a picture of their pet there, Talk about their pet first, not their spouse or kids, because they may not have a spouse or kids. For God's sake, they got a pet. It's the biggest picture in the place. All right? So understand that, and we tend to do this when we meet strangers on a plane, but it's rare how it never happens sometimes in sales. The more you get to know the customer, the more it becomes a relationship and not a number. You're more likely to get the price you want too. So building the relationship through likability. And then consensus. People want to know that they are on a winning train, that they're doing stuff other cool people do. So who are your advisors? Who are your customers? Who else is interacting with you? Who's written good things about you? Who's saying good things about you? All those things cause people to buy as well. Those 6 dimensions are really powerful tools for sales teams. It's important that you think about how your sales team uses these, because if they're not using 1 or 2 of them, they're not as strong as they could be. There's another concept called the golden circle. There's a TED Talk that's really good. If your folks are not familiar with it, have them sell in this way. Let me show you 2 examples. Let's look at Dell first. Dell's story is first. We make great computers. They're beautiful, designed and user-friendly. Want to buy one. They start with the why. I'm selling you a computer. And then they go to the why. Want to buy one. Apple has a very different sales technique. They start in the middle at the why. And everything we do, we believe in breaking the status quo. We believe in thinking differently. The way we break the status quo is making our products beautifully designed, easy to use, and user-friendly. Thinking like that, we just happen to make computers. Would you want to buy one? It's really interesting that having been at Vanderbilt teaching now for about a dozen years, there's some really strong science and behavioral psychology around why people buy what they do. And people connect on the why within the limbic system of their brain. And they really can never say why did it. But for some reason, the why gets them into a set of beliefs and values, and those beliefs and values create a bond around which vendor they're going to pick. Because they just feel like they get me better than anybody else. And the reason they think you get them is you talk about your beliefs and your values first. Go back and look at your sales material, and I would bet 7 of 10 do not start with the beliefs or values. They start with what's the product. Okay? It's hard to sell when you start with the what. It's much easier to sell when you start with the why and your beliefs and your values. The other thing to think about is, what is your customer acquisition cost? Most companies, it's way too big for what the product is they're selling. And that means they're never going to really monetize it. You really want something that looks a little bit more like this. So depending on whether you are selling online, you got a consultative sale, you got a regional sales executives, think very carefully about what it really costs to sell this customer. If I got regional salespeople and we're having to fly to customers to make deals, I know I'm going to probably spend $20,000 to $40,000 before it's done to get this deal done. There's a point at which I got to walk away. If I'm not getting traction, pouring more money into that when it's not going to happen is not a smart thing. I can spend a whole lot of money and get nothing done. So think very carefully about what is the customer acquisition cost you really have, and then think what are the things people need to do in order to deliver to you something of value. This is where I get at your question that came up earlier. What are some examples of that? So for instance, both Therapeutics and Paradigm, which are 2 of my businesses, after the first meeting, I would ask for a small set of data to analyze. It determined whether there would be a second meeting, no matter how nice they